Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a figure you think you know, Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
Famous, of course, but maybe for all the wrong reasons.
Absolutely. We're going to try and cut through, 250 years of gossip?
At least.
Hmm.
The goal here is to really understand why one woman became like a lightning rod for the rage of an entire country.
And it goes so far beyond just politics. I mean, our sources show a level of public fury that is just staggering. People hated her so much they were literally blaming her for things she couldn't possibly control.
Like what?
Like crop failures, rising tides, even just, the weather suddenly changing.
The weather. I find that detail just so profoundly shocking.
Right.
Because it shows the hatred wasn't based on facts at all. It was just this massive projection of fear onto one person.
Exactly. So our mission today, with the material we've gathered, is really to separate the myth from the human, the simple destructive villain from the heartbreakingly complicated person at the center of it all.
Because she was convenient.
So convenient. She was foreign, she was very visible, and she was completely unprepared. The perfect scapegoat, really, for this discontent that had been simmering for generations.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our sources really start with her arrival. And the key detail, I think, is her age. She gets to this foreign kingdom. She's about to be presented as a future queen, and she's 14. Just 14 years old.
A literal child.
Yeah.
A diplomatic bargaining chip sent over from Austria. And you have to think about that pressure.
I can't even imagine.
14 years old, shipped off, and she steps into Versailles, which, it looks magnificent on the outside, right?
Yeah.
But it operates as the most ruthless political theater in Europe. She was expected to be a seasoned diplomat from day one. There was no learning curve allowed.
And the sources are so clear about how hostile the environment was immediately. It wasn't just the king's family, it was the whole old court.
All the existing factions, the mistresses, the dukes, they all saw her as this Austrian outsider, someone who needed to be, broken or controlled.
So she had enemies from the moment she walked in the door.
Embedded in the walls, just waiting for a misstep. And because she was a symbol of this fragile new alliance, every single thing she did personally became a political weapon.
It sounds just suffocating. The rules weren't, don't make a big political mistake. It was these tiny, petty things.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, don't stand like that.
Don't breathe like that.
Don't blink too fast.
The sources suggest that if she held her spoon incorrectly at dinner, it wasn't just a gaffe. It was cited as hard evidence.
Evidence of what?
Of her lack of French sophistication, her foreign and therefore, corrupt nature. The court didn't want a human. They wanted a perfect symbol.
And the tragedy is she was judged for being too childish.
When she was a child.
Exactly. So when the teenager acted like a teenager, seeking out friends, being a bit naive.
It was immediately weaponized by what we call the political machine. All these established figures vying for influence.
So she was set up for failure from the second she crossed the border. And that failure was being meticulously recorded by people who already wanted her gone.
Utterly exhausting. And all these tiny mistakes, her friends, her dresses, they were just being stockpiled, ready to be used against her later.
And when she officially became queen, that scrutiny it exploded. The whispers in the court turned into national rumors.
And those rumors were printed. They became these highly inflammatory pamphlets. You have to think of it as like the 18th century version of a viral social media feed.
Okay, and what was the main accelerant? What turned that dislike into total fury?
The heir. The intense, obsessive pressure for her to produce a royal heir. Our sources really stress this as the pivot point. When years went by without a child,
the blame fell entirely on her.
Singularly and brutally. It was monstrously unfair. The whole public narrative shifted from, her etiquette to accusing her of these treasonous, immoral acts.
So how did she cope with all of this incredible pressure cooker?
She tried to find refuge in things she could control. So, distraction. Commissioning elaborate fashions, hosting parties, building her own little private world like the Petit Trianon where she could just escape.
Which, for her, were probably necessary survival tactics.
Probably. But for the desperate crowds outside, watching the price of bread skyrocket, it just looked like cruel indifference.
It's that devastating visual. We can't afford bread, but she's
sparkly and smiling. That was all the evidence they needed. And this is where the character assassination really begins, fueled by totally fabricated content.
So were these rumors organic, or was this an organized thing? Was the rumor mill being funded?
The sources suggest absolutely yes. Rival factions, even opposing governments, saw these pamphlets as a cheap and effective tool to destabilize the whole regime.
By targeting its weakest link.
The unpopular foreign queen, they just invented scandals. I mean, people hated her for things she never even owned. For instance, the infamous diamond necklace affair. The sources are definitive. The majority of those jewels she was vilified for. She never owned them, she never even accepted them, but she became the face of it all.
It's astonishing. It's a full-scale, sustained campaign, the 1700s version of a cancel campaign, like you said, but with no way for her to issue a retraction.
No block button. And that brings us to the ultimate piece of propaganda, the one line that sealed her fate forever.
Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. We have to be so clear here, based on all historical records. She never said it.
Not once.
Not once. It was a line that had been floating around for decades, attributed to other royals. It was a cynical trope, probably pulled from a work by Rousseau.
But they took this easy offensive soundbite and just plastered it onto her.
And it worked perfectly. Instantly, she stopped being a person and became a cartoon villain. The message was simple. She's rich, she's foreign, and she wants you to starve.
And then the narrative shifts so suddenly, it goes from rumors to just total physical panic. Massive, furious crowds are gathering, chanting her name like she's a monster.
It's a complete collapse, a psychological one and a political one. The palace stops being a fortress and it becomes a cage. Accounts from that time describe her as just physically distraught, running from room to room, clutching her children.
She was writing these shaky letters begging for advice, right? And what was the advice she got?
Oh, it was tragically useless. The king's advisors were telling her, just act calm, don't show fear.
Which is the least helpful thing you could possibly say to someone with a mob at their door.
It was a total failure of imagination. They were advising a monarch on court dignity, but she wasn't in court anymore. She was in a revolution. She needed an escape plan, and they gave her an etiquette lesson.
And that whole regal facade just, it cracked the night the palace was stormed.
Completely. That night, she wasn't the Queen of France anymore. She reverted entirely to instinct. The sources often focus on the politics, but the human detail is what's so profound.
She was just a mother.
A terrified mother, grabbing her kids, rushing them to safety. There are these accounts of how tightly she was holding them, not for show, but out of pure primal fear. So tight that the hairs on their heads got caught in the lace and the rings on her fingers.
Wow. That detail just, it cuts right through all the history.
That's the reality of the collapse. And the terror didn't end there. Her world just shrank. They went from Versailles to being prisoners in these cold, tiny rooms in the temple prison.
And her power was just gone.
Evaporated. The change in her letters is heartbreaking. They become short, desperate, shaky, focused only on her children's health. The woman obsessed with fashion and politics was gone. All that was left was this worried mother the public never got to see.
And this is where she seems to reach a kind of acceptance.
A stoic acceptance, yeah. The sources suggest she just realized the story was already written. Her story. She could say anything, do anything, it wouldn't matter. She'd stopped being the villain. She was just a lonely woman in a dark room.
And yet, her conduct at the trial, it's described as unbelievably calm. She's facing these vile, fabricated accusations, things so grotesque that even some of her accusers looked away.
I think she was just numb to it by then. She walked in knowing the verdict was already decided. But there was one moment, one powerful moment where she refused to defend herself against treason.
But she defended her children.
With fire. When they brought her children into it in the worst possible way, she dropped the stoicism. She stood up. And for that one moment, it wasn't a queen speaking, it was a mother. A flash of pure humanity that even her enemies respected.
That's the truest thing she ever said in public. Her final declaration.
It really was, and her final moments reflect that sad acceptance. She stepped out for the execution, pale, steady, looking straight ahead. The crowd was still baying for blood, but something had shifted.
The sources mentioned that, right?
Yeah, that there were pockets of quiet, hidden pity in the crowd. In that last second, I think some people finally saw a person, not a pamphlet caricature.
And when historians finally went through the archives decades later, the conclusion was pretty inescapable.
She was a young woman in an impossible role, trapped by politics, crushed by rumor, and terrified for her kids. Her story is just a profound warning about how myth can destroy a life.
So, to bring this all together, what we've learned from this deep dive is that Marie Antoinette was, well, she was overwhelmed, misrepresented, and ultimately misremembered. A human fighting a storm she never caused.
And that's the core lesson here. The convenience of a villain. The simple, digestible narrative, the cake quote, the jewels, it's always more effective as propaganda than the messy, complicated truth of a person.
Which really raises an important question for all of us today. Since her story is such a powerful warning about how easily fake narratives can destroy someone, what crucial responsibility do we, as consumers of information today, have to differentiate between a convenient, easily digestible narrative of a villain and the complicated, unseen human being behind it?
Something to think about as you're scrolling this week. We'll see you for the next deep dive.